Hello, Arianna. It is the 1st of January 2021. The last 3 years I've been doing yearly reviews, and I was so desperate to finish the last one that it must have sounded like I was as bored as telling you what had been going on as you probably were listening to it. So I decided pretty much after that I was going to do bullet points in future and just basically, I don't know, just sort of talk um, you know, freely, so it will feel like less static and less staged, and hopefully less boring. So all I've done is, rather than do, I think, about 9 or 10 or 11 sort of sheets of paper of everything I've written and then read it off from a page, I've just done bullet points. Anyway, the rather weird thing is what I didn't know at the start of the year was we was going to be thrust into something called COVID-19 pandemic, which from March until the current time and ongoing, hardly anyone could go out, hardly anyone could mix. People couldn't do anything. I'm guessing your soft play was cancelled because I know, for a fact that you was in a tier 4 area at this time of recording. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through the bullet points and just talk about what's actually happened. So anyway, I've already bored you to death about the last 3 years of scripted yearly video. So in March, see how quick this is already, I went to Weymouth just as lockdown was about to be brought into this country. It was very cold in Weymouth. It rained quite a bit, and it was supposed to be just a glorified excuse for doing a bit of walking. We kind of thought that, if the COVID-19 was going to cripple everyone's social life and we weren't going to be able to go on holiday, the best we could do was basically just go for long walks to places. And as we hadn't been to Weymouth before, we thought we'd do that. And I had plotted out a very nice walk that we could go on, but what I hadn't worked out was the terrain, because going in the countryside where it had been heavily rained and we didn't have the right footwear, we weren't going to be able to do that. So we just decided to walk back, and it rained and we were stuck under a bus shelter for a while until the bus turned up. But prior to that, we walked to and from Portland, and also to a place called Chesil Beach, which was actually quite nice. But did we really like Weymouth? No, not really. But the rather weird thing is it ended up being the second best thing we did that year, because we didn't do anything and neither did anybody else. Anyway, just as we sort of came home from Weymouth, the government was forcing everyone into lockdown, so all kinds of things happened, or rather didn't happen. Pubs were closing, restaurants were closing, non-essential shops were closing. And when I say non-essential, anything that basically would sell things like food, or I don't know, cleaning products, or I don't know, maybe places like Curry's that sold electrical products, things that you sort of need, like, let's just say, for example, I don't know if Curry's was actually open or not, I'm not sure. But I know like places that sold cookers would have to be open, because if you have a broken cooker or you have a washing machine, you need these things. So those sort of places remain open. But the likes of restaurants, cafes, pubs, gyms, tanning booths, clothes shops, casinos. I mean, the list can go on. I mean, it literally wasn't much open at all. You would go down Commercial Road, and everything was shut. A lot of the market was shut because a lot of the market was selling non-essential stuff. So it was only really the butchers and the fruit and veg store that was open, and everything else wasn't there. So it really was bad. So it was a very sort of boring time, and you kind of feel that, if you were spotted out and about, the police would stop you and stuff like that. And I think for many people in the early stages, people just didn't want to leave the house because they were worried about being stopped by the police. which is weird, really, because nobody actually believed we actually had any police. But hey ho. Anyway, this caused a lot of problems, like shops, forced customers to queue outside because the police had actually restricted the amount of customers were allowed to be in various shops. And where I worked, we were only allowed to have 15, so customers could get very irate with the person who was put on the door, who were preventing them from coming in, sort of saying, "Oh, it's raining outside, can't I come in?" "Oh yeah, and you and the other 30 people, yeah." It just was ridiculous. And the thing was, is because many of the shops that were selling um, non-essential stuff were closed down. That basically meant that all the customers were then sort of going into um, all the shops that were remaining open. And I should point out that something I didn't mention. Um, it wasn't just like shops that were closed down and places like that. It was also places of work, places where it was impossible to socially distance. So people who worked in offices where they weren't like 2 meters apart, they were closed, and people were actually asked to work from home. So, and a lot of factories, I think, were closed down as well. And like this had a knock-on effect throughout the whole of the country. Because let's just say, for example, you run a sandwich bar in the middle of a sort of like an industrial estate, and every sort of lunchtime, the people they finish work or whatever for lunch, and they go to your sandwich bar. If nobody's working in factories, nobody's buying sandwiches. So what happens is this place is relying on that place. They both close. So everything has a knock-on effect. It really was, and still is, a pretty bad time. So many sort of companies have literally gone to the wall. So there's so much uncertainty in the world. Even big companies have actually gone to the wall, but some of these places were struggling already, like the likes of Debenhams, I believe is closed now. What else have I written down? Shops face shortages because people are panic buying, thinking they'll never be allowed to go out again. And this was rather weird because the shops that were told to stay open had to remain open, like because we were called key workers. So it's like anywhere that sort of sells food would have to remain open. So why the hell that everyone was bulk buying, I've no idea. But the weird things that they were bulk buying were things like toilet rolls, and this is causing a mass frenzy. I mean, I do remember on one occasion we put out a pallet of toilet rolls on the shop floor, and as our supervisor Alice was actually cutting the shrink wrap off, even though you were supposed to socially distance, everyone was crowding over it. And we looked at the CCTV and we literally saw her escaping from the wreckage and stomping away. It was quite funny. So the following day, we decided we weren't going to do that because it wasn't fair. So we were putting our toilet roll by the door on the inside of our storeroom. And the idea was we were restricting who could buy what and hand it to people. And it caused all kinds of arguments because there were times when we would have like customers. I had an argument with a customer who just walked into our storeroom, and I told them to get out, and we had an argument. So I just told them to F off. And there are other things like people trying to bulk buy and or sending in their relatives or whatever, or friends or whatever, to bulk buy, which was just causing unrest amongst other people, and it was really really horrible time. Um, at a later date, people were forced to wear masks whenever they went into shop, and that wasn't just the people who went into work, but also the people that worked there as well. So this is one of my many masks, and the most annoying thing is when you're working in it or having you breathe. Oh, that's weird. I'm breathing or whatever, and normally it steams up your glasses, but for some reason it hasn't worked on this one. Annoying. But yeah, it's very usually that your glasses steam up when you're wearing a mask, so you can't see. So then you have to remove your mask, and then sort of clean your glass. Oh, it's just a nightmare. And you can get fined for being on a train without wearing a mask unless you're exempt. Oh, it's just such a pain in the ass. Now, my employer, because we were allowed to remain open, I mean, and also because after a period of time, we weren't putting people on the door to socially distance because they cut our hours down. So in order to get the stock out every day, we would just take someone off the door and just let people come in. So instead of having our 15 people in the shop, there seemed to be like an infinite amount of people coming in, which meant that our takings went up and our company did pretty well out of it. I mean, I think we'd gone from a £75,000 store a week to around about 100,000. So it was an increase of about what, 25, 30%. And because of the small shop that we was, we couldn't really cope with this. But and it carried on. We still carried on having arguments, which is unavoidable, whether it's between us and customers or customers themselves. Now, our company and our branch was doing so well that they decided they were going to have a refit, um, which meant that our store was closed for around about 4 weeks. 3 of those weeks, I relocated to Lee Park, and also on one day at working at Fareham. And that was actually quite nice, really, because I wasn't really working hard. It's just nice to take things at a slow pace. They were overstaffed there because we were there, so we got to chat to the staff there and also to each other. And it was really nice and chilled out. The only downside about the situation was the fact that the travelling time was significantly more. So it just meant that you know you were spending a lot more time away from home. So that wasn't ideal. Um, but I did like it there. But what I did learn while I was there was I used to work really hard at where I work, and working too hard and too fast for someone at my agents and the speed I was capable of doing, and I was burnt out sometimes. And I noticed that there were people at Lee Park who were faster than me, who weren't even working that fast, which is their natural pace. And I then realised that I can't work to that speed anymore, so I'm just going to step back a little bit and just do my thing. So I thought when our branch finally opens up or whatever, I'm just going to be like everyone else. I don't see the point in burning myself out because no one else is. So I kind of enjoyed that experience, really. But yeah, I was there for about 3 weeks, and then the fourth week, I had most of it had off, except for merchandising and filling the shop, our branch. Um, Now, I don't know if I covered this earlier on, but the lockdown restrictions prevented people from leading a normal life because we just couldn't do the things we want to do. Like I said, we couldn't go to pubs, clubs, um, casinos, whatever. Um, I mean, there was no point getting on a train going anywhere because when you got anywhere, everything was closed. So what was the point? I mean, the amount of people that used to cram onto a train ticket to Brighton just so they could go to the seafront or go to the various pubs. I mean, everything's closed. What's the point? So you would frequently find yourself getting on a train and having a whole carriage to yourself. And I think it's the one time in history ever where trains ran on time because there weren't that many trains running. Um, yeah, 3 holidays got cancelled this year. Well, I say 3, technically 2, but we did plan on a third one. We were supposed to go on holiday to Bodrum in Turkey to celebrate my 50th birthday, and I hadn't seen my friends for about, I can't remember, it was 7 or 9 weeks at that time, and I was climbing the walls. I think I was paranoid like everyone else about being spotted travelling anywhere and having to justify where I was. Because I mean, I do remember there were stories of people who were caught driving their car all the way to Cornwall and then turned back, and there was another person who I think was driving their car from Nottingham to London. When questioned why he was there with his kids, he said, "Oh, we were travelling to London to buy um, a loaf of bread." And I'm pretty certain that London is much more expensive than Nottingham, and I kind of like was worried that I'd get caught. So for the first few weeks, I would start. I would not do anything until I found out my friend Rachel was already doing it anyway. So I thought, you know what, if you're doing it, so will I. And I looked upon it that it may well have been the wrong thing to do, but if I'm working in a shop serving hundreds of people per day or whatever it is, I don't see why me being in a train carriage on my own is more risky than me being in close contact with all those customers at work. So that's how I ration it. rationalised it, and to be honest, it wasn't really an issue. After a while, I wasn't really worried. In fact, to be fair, I don't think a lot of people were. But I hadn't seen my friends for about, I think, 7 or 9 weeks or whatever it was. I was climbing the walls, and this was around that time of my birthday. And my friend Rachel said she wanted to meet me, so we sort of like went somewhere on the train. We went to Bognor, and then we were going to go to Arundel, and then I realised the train we were getting on was going to go directly to Red Hill. So I said, "Do you fancy going to Red Hill, but we don't tell Ben?" She said, "Yeah, all right." So we went all the way to Red Hill. We knocked on his door, and they seemed a bit mystified who was knocking on the door, and they were both shocked when we turned up. So it was a really funny day, just because no one was expecting us to be there. But as I said, I was climbing the walls. I was quite down because I took a week off my birthday, and what was I doing? So that was quite nice. So yeah, me, Rachel, and Ben were all supposed to go to Bodrum in Turkey, and all we did was go as far as Bodrum and Red Hill. And the really weird thing is when you go to Red Hill, you've got to go past Gatwick on the train, and it's really quite sad to see all those airplanes all grounded, none of them taken off. But and I think I could be wrong. I think a few airlines um, went bankrupt as well. I know that there was a company called Hayes Travel that took over Thomas Cook. Now, Thomas Cook was a travel agency, and Hayes Travel took over Thomas Cook. And just after that, the COVID crisis happened, and nobody could book any holidays through them because you couldn't go anywhere. So, Mr. Fun, they still seem to be around, but I don't know who they're servicing. But yeah, a bit strange. Right, what's next on my list? Oh yeah, the next holiday we were going to go on would have been in September. Now, the lockdown wasn't continuous. There was a lockdown, then there wasn't, and then there was a lockdown, then there was a tier system, or something, and I've lost track of what was going on. So we were planning on going to um, Agadir in September, but that didn't happen because in June, Ben's dad had a fall. He fell over, broke his hip, and because of complications with his health and with the hip plate, um, he kept being in and out of hospital. He kept having falls when he was at home. He was all over the place, and even though he had a fall in June, it is now January the 1st, and he is still in hospital. And the COVID restrictions are that you're not allowed to go into a hospital at the moment. So it's a little bit like patients don't get any visitors. It's quite sad. I mean, you just imagine if you was in hospital and you weren't allowed to see anybody for weeks. Yeah, exactly. I think you'd rather end up in a mental ward, wouldn't you, and just you know lose your mind. But yeah. So that holiday didn't happen partly because of that. I mean, I think we probably could have gone on holiday around that time, but Ben's dad was ill, so it just wasn't an option. And the other time we were thinking of going on holiday was out of desperation. I said maybe if things relax a bit, we could just go on a Christmas break to Budapest in Hungary, but that didn't even get beyond the planning stage because um, yeah, the lockdown sort of came back and that was it. So yeah, that didn't happen. Um, the best thing I did this year, or last year, shall I say? My screen has gone blank. Um, right, the best thing I did last year was a walk from Guildford to Godalming. This was mainly because with the uh, gyms being closed, it was very difficult to get any exercise, especially if you can't see the point of cycling if there's nowhere to go. So we thought we'd do a lot of long walks. So I plotted a course of going from walking from Guildford to Godalming, and it was absolutely a beautiful day out. It was a lovely walk along the riverway, and I never realised just how beautiful it was. Um, when we got to Godalming, I've never been there before. Nothing special about the place, and even less special when everything's closed and people having to queue up outside. But there was a pub that was open, which meant you could go in there, buy yourself a pint, and then sit out outside and drink it on a park bench, which is rather silly, really. You could probably go into oh, I don't know, probably go to a supermarket, buy it for half the price, and still drink it on a bench. But it was just sort of like nice to go into a pub where there's, I wouldn't say there was life, but there was something. So we did that, and then we walked back the way we came, or along the way we came, and grabbed a kebab when we got to Guildford. So it doesn't sound that exciting, but it was just such a lovely day and beautiful walk that, even though Weymouth was a time when we spent about 3 days away from the place, and we even went to Durdledore, which looks beautiful, wasn't our best time. Not helped by the fact the weather was rubbish, but it was lovely at Godalming. What else have I written down? Now, I've already covered that Ben's dad has had a fall and he still remains in hospital. Right, now I'm going to get on to my mum's health now. This is not good. Okay. Now, a lot of people over the age of 70 were actually, or was it 60? I can't remember, were actually told in the early stages of lockdown that they're not allowed to go out. And this is unfair for a variety of reasons, because the fact that as you get older, you seem to have less friends and you get less visitors. And if you're not allowed to socialise, who are you going to socialise with? So old people who are lonely anyway would get very, very isolated. And this also meant that in the early stages, they weren't even allowed to take mum out shopping because you were told not to, because she's over age and people get the ump. And I should also point out that they used to have various weird systems in various supermarkets, like you would have arrows at different ends of the aisle, so you could go up an aisle one way, but then you'd have to go into the next aisle like that. Okay, and the problem with this is you were not allowed to go into the aisle where the arrow was pointing the opposite way, because you'd be coming up against customers like this. And some customers would really kick off about this, and sometimes even staff would kick off about this. But it really annoyed me in Asda, because on at least 2 separate occasions I saw them pulling stock trolleys into the aisle the wrong way. I'm sorry, just because you got a work top on doesn't mean to say you are immune from the virus. You're not, and you're a hypocrite. So I didn't like that very much. I did think about making a complaint, but usually after about 5-10 minutes, you're sort of like, you can't be bothered, can you? But anyway, despite all this, Mum was actually very good for most of the year. I explained to her, we can't do this, we can't do that, we can't go to Asda, we can't go to, to the cafe. Eventually, cafes did start to open up again, so the one at Fratton opened, and it was really nice going over there and having a coffee. Many times that we were the only people in there, because so many people lost their jobs, they can't afford to go shopping and get a coffee, so they would just go shopping and that's it. So yeah, there is that. But Mum was actually quite good for most of the year, except for the last 3 months. And I've had an argument with Mum today, which I know I shouldn't, but her health is just driving me up the wall. Mum's memory is really bad, and it is so bad that I have something called a whiteboard. Okay? And my friend Kim suggested this, that Mum and I were having arguments that, I would tell Mum what time I'd be in, and then she basically said, "Where have you been?" I went, "I've been at work." "You said you'd be home at such and such a time." "No, I didn't. I said I'd be home at such and such a time," and we'd argue about that. So then I thought the only way around this, as Kim said, was just write down, "Mum, what time I'm home? Mum, can you cook this for me?" Blah, 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 blah. And that seemed to work for a while. And the only thing I didn't like was the fact that the thing is quite big. I wanted one half that size, but I literally walked the length and breadth of Portsmouth around all the shops that are open. There ain't that many of them. Could have gone on Amazon, but I needed one immediately and I didn't think about it at the time. So, do you know what? This video has been going for nearly 25 minutes now, and bearing in mind that in the past I got bored after 25 minutes, so I'm not bored. You might be. Anyway. So for the last, her memory's been pretty bad for a while, so kind of sorted this out, I thought. But then we've been having problems with the neighbours for a few years, and when Mum says, "Oh, we play music all day" or whatever next door, you don't think anything of it because you're kind of used to it, especially like when it sometimes keeps you up or whatever. But it got to a weird stage when Mum was sort of saying things like they were playing Phantom of the Opera next door, and went, "That's an unusual one, not heard that before." And then after a while, it became apparent that many of the time when Mum said that she was hearing them singing or playing music next door, I couldn't hear anything. And today, Mum says, "Oh, I wish they basically turned that music off." And I went in the other room. It was deadly silent. Now, Mum has got it into her head that every time I go into a room and say, "Mum, it's silent," she says, "I've turned it off." As if next door can, look through walls and see that I've entered the room and said, "Oh, right, now we've mucked around with Betty's mind or whatever, we now need to turn the music off." And there's also other situations, like a couple of days ago, um, I got woken up by Mum at around about 7 o'clock in the morning, where Mum was going, "Oh, it's been going on all night." So I goes into a room, nothing, just deadly silence. And even if there was some truth that when they realise that I'm around or whether they turn the music down, a couple of things: A, I'm not particularly that terrifying, and they wouldn't care about me anyway. And secondly, they can't see through walls. So at some point, I'm bound to notice whether the music being played loud or not, and it just isn't. And earlier on, I couldn't hear anything from next door at all. Now, Mum's hearing is bad. She refuses to wear a hearing aid. She is attached to an oxygen machine, which causes so much noise that I'm expected to believe that even though she can't hear me, she can hear this music above the oxygen machine that they could probably hear next door, and I can hear from downstairs. I mean, and I actually explained all this, and I said, "Look, I don't know what's wrong with you. I think personally it's probably dementia, but I said you need to get checked out. But Mum won't have anyone from the medical profession near her, so what can I do other than lose the will to live?" So I don't know what to do about that. I have been to the doctors, and I got her there under false pretenses, telling her that they'd actually contacted me saying that they wanted to check up on her because of her age. But I did brief them before that I said I was concerned about dementia and concerned about hearing stuff, and all they did was did a memory test on her, which they thought for her age wasn't too bad, but nothing to do with her hearing things or anything like that. And the D word was never mentioned, so I don't know what to do, and I don't get a lot of support from my family, and Mum wouldn't want it anyway, so what can I do? Anyway, New Year's Eve, which was yesterday, was somewhat subdued. Due to the bad weather, Ben couldn't get it from the Isle of Wight, where he was seeing his mum and his nan. Um, I spent the evening with my friend Kim. Ben was supposed to be there as well, but because of the COVID restrictions, that they've cancelled the sailings of the boats, and the only thing that's running is the hovercraft. And because everyone is trying to get on the hovercraft, which is socially distancing passengers, it means that it takes forever to get on. And Ben just didn't need the aggro, so he didn't come. So normally I would go out to places, like go out for a meal or go to dice and play board games or card games with people on New Year's Eve. Can't do any of that, so all I did was eat at McDonald's, have a chat, watch a bit of telly, and that's it really. It's nice, but it is what it is, isn't it? But the last thing I want to come to is the fact that it is your 10th birthday in 6 days' time, as if you hadn't forgotten. Now, I have two cards here. Okay. Now, I was out with Mum over a month ago buying a card, and Mum said she wanted to get you one. I should point out that the one that Mum has got you has not been filled in yet. So this is the one that Mum has got you. Okay, it's all a bit back to front according to my screen. Okay, I'm really sorry, it's very difficult to read that. As I said, this is not filled in, but this one is from me and is. It says 10 today, and inside it says happy 10th birthday. Okay, and I will read it to you. I've said, "Dear Arianna, hope you have a very happy birthday. Sorry I can't be with you right now, but I still love you and never stopped thinking about you. Best wishes and all my love, Dad." I did wrestle with the message that I put in there because I still feel angry. There's no getting around that. Um, but I want the message to be um, as neutral as possible because as things are, I don't know what's happening with your life. Um, I make. I've always been a bit of a Facebook stalker. I like to sort of get to know certain people, but I blocked your mum ages ago mainly because I didn't want her poking her nose into my life. But by blocking your mum on Facebook, it also prevents me from looking at any posts that she might, put up. And it is actually a good idea that I've done that because there is too much temptation for me to be looking at something that will upset me, and then I wish I'd never done it. So it's a little bit like what they say: "Let sleeping dogs lie." So I would rather not know anything. I mean, if somebody was to basically send me a photo of like what you currently look like, I would be happy with that. But I do not want to know what your mother is doing. I mean, things I don't want to know is like whether you're calling someone else daddy. I couldn't handle that. When I went to see you in 2017, um, you and your mum didn't know I was coming up, and I didn't know what was happening in your mum's life. And for all I knew, I could have arrived at your house, and your mum's boyfriend, fiance, or husband could be at the door, and you could be calling him daddy. And if I'd have seen that, that would have upset me. I mean, the worst that did actually happen probably was for most of the time you wouldn't talk to me, which I took as some form of rejection. And because you don't know what's actually happened, I can't blame you for that. And I accept that, that was always going to happen. I knew it was going to affect me, and it did, because I did cry in front of you and also when I left. Um, but I don't want to know um, um, whether you have whether you have someone you're calling daddy, and maybe if you do receive this card, and it's possible that you won't receive it because either your mum will claim that she never received it, or she'll recognise it and you'll never receive it. But I mean, if you were to receive it and it said daddy on there, I'm not quite sure, you know, um, how you're going to feel about that. Because you might have had your mum might have been saying things that aren't quite true, or you might feel let down by me, so you don't want anything to do with me. And I can understand that. But also, if you're calling someone else daddy or whatever, I've got a new daddy now. So what does this card mean to you? It's not like I've put money in it or anything. Um, and also, the reason why there's no gifts is because the last time I bought you anything, I found myself kicked out of your life after I spent well over £100 or whatever I spent on you was quite a lot. And I don't even know if you ever got those that were, where you knew they were sent by me. And that's quite hurtful because people have said, well, maybe you should send presents every year on her birthday. I think, what's the point? How do I know she's getting them? How do I know that she knows they're from me? I just don't know. So, you know, if we ever meet up in the future, um, you know, you may want to ask me certain things like, why did I not do more than I did? Why did I not do this instead of that? And the answer is I've got no answer for that because I just can't answer that. Um, I never wanted this, but you know. But anyway, the point of this card, me showing you this card, is to prove that I've written your card and it's going to be sent very shortly. And not only that, I will be putting something on my Facebook. So um, whenever every year when your memories comes around of things that happen on this day, there'll be something that said Paul sent this or Dad sent this. So that's that. But anyway, 2021, not going to be a great year for me or anyone else. Mum's health is really getting me down. Um, I can't even enjoy life outside the house because Mum will frequently phone me and harass me about something. I know she's lonely. And obviously, like if she's hearing all these music or whatever, which she claims she is or whatever, it's distressing her. But what can I do? Mum Mum doesn't believe that there's anything wrong with her. Mum doesn't want any help, and all I can do is pretend it's not happening. Just try to be out of the house as much as I can, but not out of the house too much because Mum needs company. Um, so I don't know. Everyone's got advice, but you're dealing with my mother, unfortunately, and she's very, very awkward. Anyway, I'm going to leave it now. This 35 minutes of waffling. I had a feeling this would go on longer than it normally would, but at least it hasn't been scripted, and it's only on occasions I've been looking at my notes. Anyway, I still miss you. I still love you.